Angela Cheadle had rehearsed this moment 100 times during the flight home. How Jake's face would light up when she told him his dying business was saved. How he'd hold her like he used to. But nothing prepared her for the sound of her best friend moaning his name in their bedroom. The taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving her standing in the driveway of the house she'd bought with her own money before she ever met Jake Cooper. Christmas lights twinkled along the roofline, white and elegant, nothing like the colorful chaos she usually preferred. Someone else had decorated her home. 6 months. She'd been gone 6 months, buried in dusty UK legal archives and stuffy solicitor offices, fighting a case that seemed impossible until it wasn't. Her aunt's cryptic deathbed note had led her down a rabbit hole of stolen family history, land seized from her great-great-grandfather during a corporate swindle that would make modern hedge funds blush. The case had consumed her, especially when she discovered the property's current value. Every sleepless night, every missed call to Jake that went to voicemail, every lonely hotel room in London, all of it had been worth it because she was about to save the man she loved from financial ruin. The leather portfolio tucked under her arm contained documents that would change their lives. $1.04 billion. She'd won. The settlement was hers, legally airtight, ready to transfer. Jake's construction company owed $2 million to creditors who were circling like sharks. She'd planned to walk in, kiss her husband, lay the documents on their kitchen table, and watch his face transform from the stress-worn mask he'd been wearing for the past year into something resembling hope. Instead, she heard laughter through the front door. Female laughter, Tessa's laughter. Angela's key turned silently in the lock. The house smelled different. Vanilla candles instead of the cedar ones Angela loved. New throw pillows on the couch. A woman's cardigan draped over the chair where Jake usually tossed his work jacket. Pictures of Angela had been turned face down on the mantel. The bedroom door stood half open at the end of the hall. God, Jake, right there. Angela's body moved on autopilot. Her heels made no sound on the hardwood floors. She'd refinished herself 2 years ago. Through the crack in the door, she saw them, Jake's back, muscles flexing with effort, and beneath him, Tessa's face twisted in pleasure against Angela's pillow. Their pillow, in their bed. But it wasn't the sex that shattered her. It was the intimacy. The way Jake kissed Tessa's forehead afterward. The way Tessa's hand traced patterns on his chest like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The way they fit together in the bed Angela had chosen, in the space Angela had occupied for 5 years of marriage. I love you, Tessa whispered, and Jake kissed her again without hesitation. Angela pushed the door open. It hit the wall with a crack that made them both scramble apart, sheets tangling, eyes wide with shock. She didn't scream, didn't cry. The rage burning through her veins demanded something colder than tears. She walked to Tessa first. The slap echoed like a gunshot, snapping Tessa's head to the side hard enough to leave an immediate handprint across her cheek. Tessa yelped, clutching her face, but Angela had already turned to Jake. His mouth opened. Angela, wait, I can explain. The second slap split his lip. Blood bloomed against his teeth. Angela, please! Tessa started, scrambling for a sheet. Angela dropped her suitcase on the floor with a thud that made them both flinch. The leather portfolio slid out, legal documents spilling across the hardwood. She didn't pick them up. She simply looked at them both, her husband of 5 years and her best friend of 7, and felt something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard clarity. Keep the house, Angela said, her voice so calm it frightened her. Keep each other. Keep everything. She turned and walked out. Behind her, Jake called her name, desperation cracking his voice, but Angela didn't look back. She made it to the front porch before her hands started shaking, made it to her rental car before her vision blurred, made it 3 blocks before she had to pull over and grip the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. The phone in her purse buzzed. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. Her UK attorney, Richard Pemberton. Mrs. Cooper, the press embargo lifts at midnight GMT. I need verbal confirmation before I release the news. Do you want your husband listed as co-beneficiary on the inheritance documents or just yourself? Angela stared at the message, at the words, your husband, at the question that would determine whether Jake Cooper walked away from their marriage with nothing or with $500 million. She looked back at the house, her house, where lights glowed warm in the bedroom window, where the man she'd fought for was probably still in bed with the woman who'd smiled in Angela's face every Sunday brunch for years. Her thumbs moved across the screen. Remove Jake Cooper from all documents. Inheritance is solely in my name. Release the news. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came immediately. Confirmed. Congratulations on your victory, Ms. Cheadle. The world will know by morning. Angela sat in the dark rental car, watching Christmas lights blink on houses up and down the street where families gathered, oblivious to the fact that 3 lives had just detonated blocks away. She thought about the 6 months she'd spent alone in London, the calls to Jake that grew shorter and less frequent until they stopped altogether around month 3. The way she'd told herself he was just stressed about the business, that he still loved her, that absence made hearts grow fonder. She'd been fighting to save them while he'd been replacing her. Her phone buzzed again. A notification from a UK news site. Breaking. American woman wins historic £804 million land settlement in century-old property dispute. Then another, and another. Within minutes, her phone exploded with alerts, news sites, social media, messages from numbers she didn't recognize. But nothing from Jake. Angela pulled back onto the road, driving with no destination in mind, as the city she'd called home for a decade became a blur of lights, and the life she'd known for 5 years became nothing but wreckage in her rearview mirror. Her phone rang. Jake's number. She watched it ring once, twice, 3 times, then sent it to voicemail. It rang again, immediately. This time, she turned the phone off completely. By the time she checked into the Peninsula Hotel an hour later, using a credit card that bore only her maiden name, the story had gone international. The front desk clerk's eyes widened in recognition, but Angela silenced him with a look that could cut glass. "Penthouse suite," she said, "and I don't want to be disturbed." In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. The same woman who'd left for London 6 months ago, but not. Her eyes held something they hadn't before, something sharp and unbreakable. She'd left home to save her husband and returned to find he didn't want saving. Fine. She'd save herself instead. Chapter 2. The silence that destroyed everything. Jake Cooper spent Christmas morning calling his wife's phone 47 times, each unanswered ring a hammer, driving home a truth he'd been too arrogant to consider. Angela's silence wasn't weakness, it was war. The house felt contaminated with his guilt. Tessa had fled within an hour of Angela's departure, tears streaming, babbling apologies Jake barely heard over the roaring in his own ears. He'd sat on the edge of the bed, their bed, Angela's bed, staring at the suitcase she'd dropped. At the leather portfolio with documents he couldn't fully comprehend, spilling across the floor. He'd picked them up with shaking hands. Legal letterhead from Pemberton and Associates London, settlement agreements, property transfers, numbers that made his vision swim because they couldn't possibly be real. $1 billion.04. His phone rang at 6 in the morning on Christmas Day. His mother's voice, shrill with panic. "Jacob Andrew Cooper, tell me what I'm seeing on the news isn't real. Tell me you did not cheat on Angela the week she became a billionaire." "The week?" Jake's voice cracked. "Mum, I didn't know. The whole world knows now. It's on every channel. Chicago woman wins historic UK land case worth over $1 billion. And there's your wife's face, Jake. Your wife who you haven't seen in 6 months because she was overseas fighting for..." Her voice broke. "Oh my God, she was fighting for your future. She was going to save your business." Jake's stomach lurched. He ran to the bathroom and vomited until nothing came up but bile and self-loathing. By noon, his business partner Marcus had called 3 times, demanding to know why Jake never mentioned his wife was about to inherit a fortune that could save their company. By 2, his creditors were calling with sudden willingness to restructure payment plans. By 4, 3 different investors wanted meetings. Everyone wanted a piece of Angela's money. Everyone assumed Jake had access to it. No one understood that he'd incinerated his access the moment he'd kissed Tessa Thompson. Jake tried Angela's phone again. Straight to voicemail. He tried her email, her social media, all silent. He called her colleagues at the non-profit where she'd worked before leaving for London. No one had heard from her. He called hospitals, terrified she'd done something desperate. Nothing. Angela Cheadle had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed, leaving behind only the shell of a marriage and a suitcase full of billion-dollar documents that bore only her name. Tessa came back that evening, eyes swollen from crying. "Jake, we need to talk." "Not now, Tessa. It can't wait." Her voice shook. "The baby. I need to tell you something about the baby." Jake's head snapped up. Tessa was 3 months pregnant, or so she'd told him when she'd moved in 4 months ago, seeking refuge after her divorce. The pregnancy had been the catalyst that transformed their friendship into something else. She'd been vulnerable, he'd been lonely, and Angela had been an ocean away, her calls growing shorter, her attention consumed by legal battles Jake hadn't understood. "What about the baby?" Jake's voice came out flat. Tessa's hands twisted together. "I need to take a paternity test." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire already burning out of control. "What?" Jake whispered. "My ex-boyfriend, the contractor you hired for the kitchen renovation last spring. We slept together a few times before I told him I wanted to try again with my husband. It ended badly. Then I found out I was pregnant and the timing. I thought it was his, but then you and I—" She was crying again, mascara tracking down her face. "I convinced myself it was yours because I wanted it to be yours, because you were kind to me when no one else was." Jake stared at her. This woman he'd destroyed his marriage for. This woman he'd thought he loved. This woman who'd looked at him like he hung the moon, while Angela's attention had been fragmented across 3,000 miles and a court case he'd dismissed as family estate nonsense. "Get out," he said quietly. "Jake, get out of my house. Get out of Angela's house. Get the hell out." Tessa grabbed her purse, stumbling toward the door. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "You never meant to get caught." Jake's voice was ice. "None of us did. But here we are." After she left, Jake sat in the living room Angela had decorated with careful attention to every detail. The bookshelf she'd arranged by color because it made her smile. The plants she'd nurtured with the same patience she'd given their marriage. The framed photo from their wedding day, where Angela's smile had been so bright it hurt to look at now. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but he recognized Angela's attorney's formal tone from the letterhead he'd seen. "Mr. Cooper, divorce papers will be delivered via courier tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please ensure you're present to sign for them." Jake's hands trembled as he typed, "Can I talk to her? Please, I just need to explain." The response came swift and brutal. "Mrs. Cheadle has instructed me to inform you that there is nothing you can say that she needs to hear. She was coming home to save you. You chose to destroy her instead. Those are her words, not mine. Please be ready to sign tomorrow." Jake read the message 7 times, each word a nail in the coffin of his marriage. His business partner called again. "Jake, man, have you talked to Angela? Do you think she'd consider investing in—" Jake hung up. His mother called. His sister, his college roommate, who he hadn't spoken to in 3 years, but who'd apparently seen the news. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Could Jake get access to the money? No one asked if he was okay. No one asked if Angela was okay. And why would they? He'd made his choice. He'd chosen temporary comfort over permanent partnership. He'd chosen Tessa's immediate attention over Angela's long-distance devotion. He'd chosen to stop calling his wife because her voice had sounded tired and distracted, never once considering that she was tired from fighting for their future. Jake pulled out his laptop and searched Angela's name. The internet had exploded. Hundreds of articles, photos of Angela leaving the London courthouse, looking exhausted but triumphant. Timelines of the case, how she'd discovered hidden documents in her deceased aunt's estate, how she'd pursued the claim despite lawyers telling her it was impossible, how she'd spent 6 months building an ironclad case that had culminated in one of the largest private property settlements in UK history. 6 months. Every day of those 6 months, she'd been fighting, and every day Jake had been letting her go. One article included a quote from her UK attorney. Ms. Cheadle's dedication to this case was extraordinary. She worked 18-hour days, rejected multiple early settlement offers that would have made her wealthy but not whole, and refused to give up even when the opposing counsel tried every trick to break her. She told me, "This isn't about the money. This is about justice for my family and security for my future." She's a remarkable woman. Jake's eyes burned. Security for my future. She'd meant security for their future, for the business he'd built and she'd believed in, for the life they'd planned, and he'd torched it all because he was lonely. The courier arrived exactly at 10 a.m. the next morning. Jake signed for the thick manila envelope with hands that shook so badly he could barely hold the pen. Inside, divorce papers. Clean, clinical, devastating. Angela was filing on grounds of adultery and fraud. Fraud. Jake scanned the documents until he found it. The mortgage he'd taken out on the house using both their names. The house that Angela had owned free and clear before their marriage. The mortgage company had required both signatures. Jake had forged Angela's. He remembered that day. The business had been hemorrhaging money. He'd needed capital. The house had so much equity. He'd told himself Angela would understand, that he'd tell her once the business stabilized, that it was his house too now that they were married. He'd never told her, and now it was fraud. The settlement terms were stark. Angela kept the house, her inheritance, and everything she'd brought into the marriage. Jake got nothing except his business debts, and a bill for $340,000, the fraudulent mortgage plus interest and damages. There was a handwritten note paper-clipped to the final page. Angela's handwriting, the loops and curves he'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and love notes left on the bathroom mirror. "I was coming home to save you. You chose to destroy us instead. Keep the house. I'm keeping my future." Jake signed every page. What else could he do? Fight her in court? Drag this out? Beg for mercy from the woman whose heart he'd shredded? He boxed up the signed documents and called the courier. As the man drove away, Jake's phone buzzed with a news alert. Billionaire heiress Angela Cheadle, spotted at Chicago charity gala with empire builder Dominic Ashford. New romance? The photo showed Angela in a black gown that hugged her curves, laughing at something a tall, distinguished man was saying. She looked radiant, powerful, nothing like the tired, hopeful woman who'd walked into their bedroom days ago. Jake stared at the photo until his vision blurred. She'd already moved on, and he was still drowning in the wreckage of what he'd destroyed. Chapter 3. The Queen Learns Her Power. Angela had spent 6 months watching British lawyers dismantle corporate empires in courtrooms. Now she understood that real power wasn't rage, it was precision. The Peninsula Hotel penthouse had become her war room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, the city sprawling beneath her like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. 3 laptops sat open on the dining table, each screen displaying a different aspect of her carefully orchestrated dismantling of the life she'd left behind. Her UK attorney, Richard Pemberton, appeared via video call with his characteristic British punctuality. "Ms. Cheadle, the settlement funds have transferred to your account. I've taken the liberty of connecting you with Westbrook Private Wealth Management. They're expecting your call." "Thank you, Richard." Angela's voice was steady, betraying none of the vertigo she'd felt watching 9 zeros appear in her bank balance. "Send me their information. And Richard, remove the Mrs. Cooper from all my documents. It's Ms. Cheadle or nothing." "Already done. Though I must say I'm impressed with how you're handling this. Most people in your position would be falling apart," Angela finished. "I did that already, behind closed doors where it belongs. Now I'm moving forward." After the call ended, Angela turned to the second laptop where a forensic accountant named Diana Foster presented her findings via screen share. "Ms. Cheadle, The mortgage your husband took out on your property was definitively fraudulent. The signature authentication firm confirmed someone forged your name. Illinois law is clear. This constitutes fraud and identity theft. Angela's jaw tightened. He used my house as collateral without my knowledge. Worse, he told the mortgage company you were aware and consenting. There are emails in the file claiming you'd verbally approved but were traveling for work. He impersonated you to the loan officer over the phone, claiming to be you calling from London to confirm. The betrayal cut deeper than the adultery somehow. Tessa had been a moment of weakness. But this was calculated theft. This was Jake gambling with her security because he'd stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as a resource. What are my options? Diana's smile was sharp. Legally, you can press criminal charges. Financially, you're entitled to full restitution plus damages. The divorce settlement covers the financial aspect, but if you want to pursue criminal charges, no. Angela cut her off. The words surprised even herself. I don't want him in jail. I want him to understand what he lost. Prison would make him a victim. This way, he has to live with being the man who destroyed $1 billion marriage for a woman carrying another man's baby. Diana's eyebrows rose. You know about the paternity issue? I have my sources. Angela didn't mention the private investigator she'd hired, the same one who'd confirmed Tessa had moved into Angela's house while Angela's paychecks from the non-profit were still auto-depositing to cover the mortgage Jake had fraudulently secured, the same investigator who'd documented Tessa's vehicle receiving a resident parking permit for their gated community, not a visitor pass. Tessa hadn't just slept with Jake. She'd moved into Angela's life like a hermit crab, claiming an abandoned shell. The third laptop chimed with an incoming call from her divorce attorney, Gloria Martinez, a woman whose reputation for ruthlessness was matched only by her impeccable win record. Angela, I need to prepare you. The media attention is going to intensify. Your story has everything the public loves. Betrayal, massive wealth, a powerful woman wronged. You're going to get interview requests, book deal offers, people coming out of the woodwork claiming to be your friend. I don't want fame, Gloria. I want closure. Then we move fast and clean. Jake's attorney sent over the signed papers this morning. He's not fighting anything. The man knows he has no leverage. Good. Angela stood, pacing to the window. Below, the city pulsed with life. People heading to work, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in the penthouse above them. What about the house? It's yours. Once the divorce is finalized, you can do whatever you want with it. Sell it, rent it, burn it down. Though I don't recommend that last option from a legal standpoint. Angela laughed, the sound bitter. I'm not sure I ever want to see it again. Understandable, though from a practical standpoint, it's worth about $800,000. Not much compared to your inheritance, but donate it. The words came out before Angela had fully formed the thought. Excuse me? There's a women's shelter on the south side, Hope Rising. They help women escaping domestic violence rebuild their lives, deed the house to them. They can use it as transitional housing or sell it for funding, I don't care which. I just want something good to come from that place. Gloria was quiet for a moment. That's a significant charitable donation. The tax implications. I have $1 billion, Gloria. I think I can afford to give away one house without missing a meal. Fair point. I'll draw up the paperwork. Angela, for what it's worth, you're handling this with more grace than most people would. After the call ended, Angela allowed herself 60 seconds of pure feeling. She thought about walking into that bedroom, about the Christmas lights she hadn't put up, about the vanilla candles that had replaced her cedar ones, about the way Jake had kissed Tessa with the same casual intimacy he'd once reserved for Angela. 60 seconds. Then she locked it down and returned to work. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Cheadle, this is Jonathan Westbrook from Westbrook Private Wealth Management. Richard Pemberton gave me your contact. I'd like to discuss investment strategies for your settlement. Are you available for a call? Angela was typing a response when her phone rang. Not a number in her contacts, but the UK country code made her answer. Ms. Cheadle, this is Dominic Ashford. I'm calling from London. We haven't met, but I've been following your case with great interest. I believe we have some business to discuss regarding your newly acquired property. The name rang a bell. Angela pulled up her fourth laptop. Research was her weapon now, and searched while he talked. Dominic Ashford, British Ghanaian venture capitalist, founder of Ashford Development Group, net worth estimated at $2 billion, specializing in sustainable urban development. Divorced twice, no children. Reputation for brutal business tactics tempered by genuine commitment to community impact projects. Mr. Ashford, I'm listening. I'll be direct because I suspect you appreciate efficiency. Your land in the UK, the property you just won, is adjacent to a development my firm has been planning for 3 years. Your victory complicated my timeline, but it also presents an opportunity. I'd like to propose a partnership. I'm not interested in selling. I'm not interested in buying. His accent was crisp, professional, with an undercurrent of something sharp. I want to build with you. Mixed-use development, sustainable housing, community spaces. You have the land. I have the expertise and capital to develop it properly. We split the profits and create something that actually matters. Angela pulled up his company's portfolio. The projects were stunning. Modern design integrated with green spaces, affordable housing mixed with luxury units, community centers anchoring each development. Not the soulless glass boxes that dominated most urban development. Why would I partner with you instead of developing it myself? Because you've spent the last 6 months fighting for that land in court, and you're about to spend the next several months fighting a very public divorce. You're brilliant enough to have won a billion-dollar case, but you're not a developer. I am, and I don't waste time on projects that don't work. If I'm proposing this, it's because the numbers and the vision both make sense. The audacity should have offended her. Instead, she found herself intrigued. I'm in Chicago, Mr. Ashford. I'll be in Chicago tomorrow evening. There's a charity gala at the Drake Hotel, Children's Medical Research Foundation. Are you attending? Angela pulled up her calendar. The invitation had arrived months ago, back when she'd been on the foundation's board. Before London, before everything. I wasn't planning to. Consider attending. We can have a conversation that doesn't waste either of our time. If you're interested, meet me there. If not, I'll pursue alternative sites for my development, and you can sit on $1 billion worth of vacant land while paying UK property taxes. He hung up before she could respond. Angela stared at her phone, something like amusement cutting through the armor she'd built. The man had nerve. Most people were treating her like broken glass, tiptoeing around her pain. Dominic Ashford had treated her like a business equal with something he wanted. She called Gloria back. That gala tomorrow night at the Drake. Can you get me on the list? You're already on the list, Angela. You've been on the board for 2 years. Right. I need a dress, something that makes a statement. What kind of statement? Angela looked at her reflection in the darkening window. The woman staring back wasn't the one who'd left for London 6 months ago. That woman had been softer, more willing to bend, more concerned with keeping peace than demanding respect. This woman was something new, something forged in betrayal and tempered in British courtrooms. The kind that says, I'm not a victim, Angela said quietly. I'm a threat. Chapter 4. The man who challenged her, Dominic Ashford, had built 3 empires from nothing and married the wrong woman twice. He recognized survivors because he was one. The Drake Hotel ballroom glittered with Chicago's elite crystal chandeliers, casting fractured light across designer gowns and rented tuxedos. Dominic nursed a whiskey at the bar, watching the crowd with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned early that the most interesting people were never the loudest. He saw Angela Cheadle the moment she entered. The black gown should have been simple, sleeveless, high neck, fitted to her curves, but on her it became armor. She moved through the crowd with her head high, ignoring the whispers that followed in her wake. Everyone knew who she was, the betrayed billionaire, the woman scorned, the year's most scandalous story. She didn't look scorned. She looked dangerous. Dominic approached, as she accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Ms. Cheadle, Dominic Ashford." Angela turned, and up close he could see the intelligence in her dark eyes, the set of her jaw that spoke of decisions made and held. "Mr. Ashford, you're persistent, I'll give you that. Persistence is underrated, so is directness, which is why I'm going to ask you something most people here are too polite to say out loud." He leaned slightly closer. "You just won £800 million in a property settlement. What's your plan? Sell it to the highest bidder and live off the interest, or actually build something?" Angela's eyes narrowed. "You don't know me well enough to make assumptions about my ambitions." "You're right, I don't. But I know you spent 6 months fighting a case that 3 different law firms told you was unwinnable. I know you rejected 2 settlement offers, one for £50 million, one for £200 million, because you wanted full vindication, not compromise. That tells me you're not interested in easy money, you're interested in winning. Winning and building aren't the same thing? No, but they require the same qualities: vision, stubbornness, willingness to bet on yourself when everyone else is betting against you." Dominic sipped his whiskey. "I've done my research on you, Ms. Cheadle. Before your marriage, you ran a non-profit that increased donations by 400% in 3 years. You have an MBA from Northwestern. You speak 3 languages. And then you married a man who convinced you to put your career on hold to support his." Angela's face hardened. "Careful, Mr. Ashford. You're approaching territory that's none of your business." "You're right. I apologize. I'm not interested in your marriage or your divorce, except for how it affects your availability for business decisions. And right now, you're sitting on property that could become a landmark development or a very expensive patch of grass. I want to know which you choose." "Why do you care?" "Because my firm has been planning a development adjacent to your land for 3 years. Your case disrupted my timeline, but it also created an opportunity. Alone, my property makes a decent project. Combined with yours, we could create something transformative. Mixed-use development, sustainable design, affordable housing integrated with market-rate units, community spaces that actually serve communities instead of just looking good in architectural magazines." Angela studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "And you want to partner with me because?" "Because you have something I need, and I have something you need. You have prime London property with development rights already approved from your court settlement. I have 20 years of development experience and relationships with contractors, architects and city planners who can turn that land into something worth far more than your settlement. We partner, split the profits, and both walk away with more than we started with." "You make it sound simple." "It's not. Nothing worth doing is simple, but it's possible if you're willing to work for it instead of just sitting on your victory." Angela's jaw tightened. "You have a lot of opinions about what I should do with my property." "I do. And if they offend you, walk away and I'll pursue alternative sites. But I think you're too smart to make decisions based on offense instead of opportunity." A photographer approached, camera raised. "Ms. Cheadle, can I get a photo for the Tribune?" Angela turned, her smile automatic and professional, and Dominic stepped back to give her space. The flash went off. Then again. The photographer thanked her and moved on, but Dominic noticed the tension in Angela's shoulders, the way her smile dropped the moment the camera turned away. "You hate this," he said quietly. "Hate what?" "Being the story. Everyone knows what happened. Everyone has an opinion. You can't go anywhere without being recognized as the woman whose husband cheated the week she became a billionaire." Angela's laugh was sharp. "You really don't believe in small talk, do you? Life's too short. I've wasted enough time on polite lies. I'm 52 years old, Miss Cheadle. I've been divorced twice, both times because I chose business over marriage. Both times my ex-wives were justified in leaving. I learned something from that pain. There's no point pretending to be something you're not. I'm a builder. It's what I do well. Relationships, apparently, not so much." "That's remarkably honest. It's efficient. I'm not looking for romance. I'm looking for a partner who can match my vision and my work ethic. Everything I've read about you suggests you could be that person. If I'm wrong, tell me now and we'll both save time." Angela tilted her head, studying him. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd treat me like I'm made of glass. Someone who'd tiptoe around the scandal and offer sympathy I don't want." "I read about your case. You went toe-to-toe with corporate lawyers who tried every trick to break you. You documented everything, built an airtight case, won a settlement that stunned legal experts. That's not someone who needs coddling. That's someone who needs challenge." For the first time that evening, Angela's smile reached her eyes. "You're either very perceptive or very presumptuous." "Both. It served me well." Dominic pulled a business card from his jacket pocket. "Here's my proposal. Come to London next month. Tour the properties, yours and mine. Meet with my architects and planners. See what we could build together. If you're interested, we move forward. If not, we shake hands and go our separate ways. No pressure, no games, just business." Angela took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. "And if I say no, then I respect your decision and find another site. I've built empires before, Ms. Cheadle. I'll build another. But I'd rather build one with someone who understands what it costs to fight for something and win." "You're very confident. I'll say yes." "I'm confident you're smart enough to recognize opportunity when it's presented. Whether you take it is your decision." Angela slipped the card into her clutch. "I'll consider it. That's all I ask." Dominic raised his glass. "To new possibilities." Angela clinked her champagne flute against his whiskey glass. "To possibilities." They talked for another hour, the conversation ranging from London property markets to sustainable design to the failures of modern urban planning. Angela challenged every assumption he made. Dominic countered with data and experience. By the time the charity auction began, Dominic realized he was enjoying himself in a way he hadn't in years. This woman wasn't looking for rescue. She was looking for respect. He could work with that. As the evening wound down, Angela excused herself to speak with board members she'd been avoiding. Dominic watched her navigate the crowd, gracious but guarded, smiling but never letting anyone close enough to ask the questions she didn't want to answer. A photographer caught them together near the end of the night. A candid shot, Angela laughing at something Dominic had said, his hand gesturing as he made a point about building codes, both of them clearly engaged in conversation that had nothing to do with scandal or sympathy. Neither of them noticed the camera. They would see the photo the next morning, splashed across social media with breathless captions: "Billionaire heiress Angela Cheadle, spotted with empire builder Dominic Ashford, new romance." But in that moment, they were just two people who'd built and lost and were considering whether they had the courage to build again. Chapter 5. The House of Cards Burns. Tessa Thompson had spent her entire life confusing men's temporary need for permanent love. And now she was learning the difference. The cramped apartment smelled like mildew and her roommate's cheap perfume. Tessa sat on the edge of the twin bed she'd bought from Goodwill, staring at the envelope in her hands like it contained a live snake. Paternity test results. She'd paid extra for rush processing. Her hand shook as she tore it open. The words blurred until she forced herself to focus. Probability of paternity, 0%. Jake Cooper was not the father of her baby. Tessa's phone buzzed with a call from her mother. She sent it to voicemail, just like she'd done with the previous 15 calls. Her family had seen the news. Everyone had seen the news. The woman, Jake's wife, became a billionaire, and Jake had been in bed with Tessa. The internet had been brutal. Her full name, her photo, her LinkedIn profile, all of it dissected by strangers who didn't know her and didn't care to. Home-wrecking slut. She deserves everything she gets. Hope karma hits her hard. Karma had arrived with clinical efficiency via DNA test. Another message notification, this one from her ex-boyfriend, the contractor whose child she was actually carrying. Saw the test results. Want nothing to do with this. Don't contact me again. Tessa deleted it and immediately regretted it because now she had no proof he'd acknowledged paternity, which meant no child support, which meant she was completely alone. Her phone rang again. Jake's number. she answered before thinking it through. Tessa, the test results? I know. Her voice came out hollow. I'm sorry. I convinced myself that if you lied convincingly enough, it would become true. Jake's laugh was bitter. Yeah, I'm familiar with that strategy. Didn't work out well for either of us. Jake, please. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was just lonely, desperate, jealous of what Angela and I had. His voice sharpened. I've spent the last week trying to figure out when it started, when you stopped being Angela's friend and started being whatever this was. Tessa closed her eyes. She could see it perfectly. The slow erosion of boundaries. The coffee dates, where she'd complained about her failing marriage, and Jake had listened. The evening he'd invited her over for dinner, when Angela called to say she'd be staying in London another month. The bottle of wine that became two. The way his hand had brushed hers, reaching for the same glass. The kiss that she'd initiated, but he hadn't stopped. It started the night you asked me to help pick out Angela's birthday present, Tessa whispered. You said you wanted to get her something special because she'd been gone so long. We spent 3 hours shopping. You told me about your business struggles. I told you about my divorce, and I remember thinking, he sees me. He actually sees me, Tessa. And then Angela's birthday came and went, and she didn't come home. She sent a voice message thanking you for the necklace, but she was too busy with depositions to video call. And you looked so defeated, Jake, so lonely, and I thought, she doesn't appreciate him. She doesn't see what she has. So you decided to take it. I decided to give you what she wasn't. Tessa's tears finally came, hot and humiliating. Attention, presence, someone who put you first. I told myself I was being a good friend, that you deserved better, that if Angela really loved you, she'd be here. And the pregnancy? Tessa's shame crystallized into something solid in her chest. I found out I was pregnant the week before I told you. I'd slept with my ex twice, angry, stupid mistakes after another fight with my husband. Then my marriage imploded and I needed somewhere to stay, and you offered Angela's house, and I thought, you thought you'd trap me with a baby that wasn't mine. I thought I could make it real. If you believed it was yours, if we built a life together, then it would be true in all the ways that mattered. The DNA wouldn't change that you loved me, or that I loved you, or that we could be a family. Jesus Christ, Tessa, do you hear yourself? I hear how it sounds. But Jake, you loved me too. Don't pretend you didn't. Those 4 months we had, that was real. Jake's silence stretched so long Tessa thought he'd hung up. Then, you're right, I did love you, or I loved who I thought you were. A woman who needed me, who made me feel important when my wife made me feel forgotten. But it wasn't real, Tessa. It was two lonely people using each other to fill holes we should have fixed ourselves. It could have been real if Angela hadn't. Don't. Jake's voice turned to ice. Don't you dare blame Angela for this. She was fighting to save our future while we destroyed it. She spent 6 months in a foreign country, working 18-hour days, sleeping in cheap hotels, building a case that would solve every financial problem I had, and I repaid her by sleeping with her best friend in her bed. She abandoned you. She was working. She was fighting for us. And I couldn't handle being alone for 6 months like an adult, so I replaced her with you. Jake's voice cracked. We're both pathetic, Tessa. The only difference is I'm starting to understand that, and you're still making excuses. The line went dead. Tessa sat in the silence of her sad little apartment, one hand on her belly where a child grew, a child who would never have a father, whose mother had destroyed every meaningful relationship in her life, chasing a fantasy of being chosen. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. Mom's in the hospital, heart attack, they're saying stress, hope you're happy. Tessa dropped the phone like it burned. Over the next several days, the world Tessa had known dissolved completely. Her family refused to see her, blaming her scandal for their mother's health crisis. Her friends stopped returning calls. The job she'd been interviewing for withdrew their offer after further consideration. Her social media became a wasteland of strangers' hatred. She tried reaching out to Angela one final time, sending an email she spent hours composing. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know. I never meant to hurt you. I was jealous and weak, and I convinced myself Jake loved me when he just loved not being alone. Watching what you've built after I helped destroy your marriage taught me what strength actually looks like. I hope someday I can show my daughter the same." The response came from Angela's attorney. "Ms. Cheadle has instructed me to inform you that you are not to contact her again through any channel. Further attempts will be considered harassment. This is your only warning." Tessa read it 3 times before she finally understood. Angela wasn't going to punish her with legal action or public humiliation or revenge. She was going to do something far more devastating. She was going to treat Tessa like she didn't exist. No rage, no vendetta, just complete and utter erasure from a life Tessa had tried to steal. That night, Tessa packed the few possessions she'd taken from Angela's house: a sweater left in the dryer, a book borrowed and never returned, a coffee mug Jake had given her that she now realized had been Angela's favorite. She boxed them up and left them at a donation center, unable to look at the reminders of her worst self. She'd wanted to be seen, to be chosen, to matter to someone. Instead, she'd made herself invisible to everyone who'd ever cared. Chapter 6. The truth she didn't want to hear. Angela had spent 6 months watching British lawyers dismantle corporate empires in courtrooms, but Dominic forced her to ask a harder question. Had she been a partner or a ghost? London in springtime was everything the brochures promised. Blooming gardens, temperate weather, streets humming with possibility. Angela stood on the rooftop of Dominic's offices in Canary Wharf, surveying the property that had consumed her legal battle and the adjacent land his firm had been developing. Several months had passed since the charity gala. Months of video calls, architectural plans, financial projections, and increasingly personal conversations that strayed far from business into territory Angela hadn't expected. She'd spent those months not just reviewing Dominic's proposals, but educating herself. She'd enrolled in an intensive development finance course online, spent weekends reading urban planning case studies, attended zoning board meetings in Chicago to understand how cities actually functioned at the regulatory level. She'd learned that winning a billion-dollar case didn't make her a developer any more than owning a piano made her a concert pianist. The knowledge gap was humbling, and exactly the wake-up call she needed. Dominic joined her at the railing, 2 coffee cups in hand. "You're quiet. That's usually when you're about to tell me my latest plan is rubbish." Angela accepted the coffee with a small smile. "I've been reading the community impact assessment you sent. The section on affordable housing integration. You're proposing 40% affordable units. Most mixed-income developments barely hit 20%. Why the higher ratio? Because 20% creates poor doors and separate entrances. 40% forces true integration. The economics still work if we're smart about density and material choices." He studied her. "You've been doing your homework." "I spent the last month reading every book on sustainable development I could find. Took an online course in development finance. Attended 3 Chicago zoning hearings to understand how approval processes actually work." Angela sipped her coffee. "You were right when we met. I'm not a developer. I was just someone sitting on valuable land. But I can learn. I have been learning." Dominic's expression shifted, surprise mixed with something that looked like respect. "Most people in your position would hire consultants and trust their expertise. You're actually studying the fundamentals. I don't want to be a passive investor who signs where you tell me to sign. If we're doing this, I need to understand what we're building and why every decision matters. The financial models, the zoning implications, the community impact, all of it." She turned to face him fully. "I spent 6 months becoming an expert in 19th century property law to win that case. I can spend time becoming competent in development. Not just competent. You've been challenging my assumptions in our calls. That question last week about stormwater management, my own engineers hadn't caught that potential issue because I read 3 case studies about developments that flooded due to inadequate drainage planning. I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm trying to be useful." "You're succeeding." Dominic set down his coffee. "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask you. Are you moving too fast, Or are you running from something you don't want to face? The question landed like a stone in still water. What do you mean? Your marriage. You talk about Jake's betrayal, about what he did, about Tessa's role in it, but you never talk about your part. Angela's spine straightened. My part? I was in London fighting for our future while he was destroying it. What exactly is my part in his decision to cheat? Nothing. His betrayal is entirely his responsibility. But marriages don't just die from infidelity. They die from neglect, from two people drifting apart and neither one fighting to close the gap. Dominic's voice was gentle but unflinching. 6 months is a long time to be apart. Did you make time for him during that period? Real time, not just quick calls about logistics? I was working 18-hour days. So was I during both my marriages. It's an excuse, not a reason. Angela, I'm not defending what Jake did. I'm asking if you've thought about what you didn't do. Angela's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hand. I called him. I tried. How often? Once a week? Twice? And when he didn't answer, did you try harder, or did you tell yourself he was stressed and let it go? The truth sat heavy in Angela's chest. Jake's calls had become shorter around month 2. Distracted. He'd stopped asking when she was coming home and started just accepting that she wasn't. And she'd let him. She'd told herself he understood, that he was giving her space to work, that he was supporting her by not complaining about her absence. She'd never asked if he was okay, if he was lonely, if he needed her. I assumed he'd wait, Angela whispered. I assumed our marriage was strong enough to survive 6 months apart. Maybe it would have been, or maybe it was already struggling and neither of you wanted to acknowledge it. I don't know, I wasn't there. But Angela, I've watched you build financial models and dissect contracts and argue with architects for months now. You're brilliant at analyzing systems and finding weaknesses. Have you applied that same analysis to your marriage? This feels uncomfortably like therapy. It's not. It's business. Dominic's smile was wry. We're about to enter a partnership that will require trust, communication, and the ability to handle conflict without running. Before we do that, I need to know you've dealt with your past, because if you're still running from it, that affects my risk assessment. Angela laughed despite herself. You're really comparing our business partnership to marriage counseling. I'm saying both require the same skills: honesty, accountability, willingness to examine your role in failures instead of just blaming the other party. He paused. My first wife left me because I chose a building project in Dubai over her father's funeral. My second wife left me because I forgot our anniversary 3 years running. Both times, I blamed work, told myself they knew who I was when they married me, told myself I couldn't help being driven. But the truth was, I could have tried harder. I could have hired a better second-in-command. I could have set boundaries. I could have admitted that I was using work as an excuse not to deal with the emotional demands of marriage. I wasn't a victim of my ambition. I was hiding behind it. The words cut close to truths Angela had been avoiding. She thought about the nights in London when she'd worked until she was too exhausted to think, the way she'd thrown herself into the case with an intensity that left no room for anything else. The relief she'd felt when Jake's calls became less frequent because it meant she didn't have to explain why she was choosing work over coming home. I told myself I was fighting for us, Angela said quietly. But maybe I was fighting for me, for the victory, for the validation of winning an impossible case. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And it doesn't excuse what Jake did. Nothing does. But it might explain why your marriage was vulnerable when temptation arrived. Angela was quiet for a long moment, watching clouds drift across the London skyline. You're not what I expected when you called me. What did you expect? Someone who'd let me stay comfortable in my victimhood. Someone who'd tell me I was blameless and remarkable, and Jake was an idiot who didn't deserve me. You are remarkable. Jake's betrayal was inexcusable, but you're also someone who's capable of introspection and growth. The question is, whether you choose it or whether you stay frozen in the moment he hurt you. Angela turned to face him fully. Why do you care? This is supposed to be a business partnership. Because I've worked with brilliant people who are still bleeding from old wounds. They make terrible decisions, they self-sabotage, they burn out or blow up or disappear when things get difficult. Dominic held her gaze. I need to know that if we do this, if we build something together, you're building forward, not just running from what's behind you. And if I'm still figuring that out, then we move slowly. We build the partnership on honesty instead of assumptions. And if at any point you realize you're not ready, you walk away, and I respect that. Angela studied him. This man who challenged instead of coddled, who demanded accountability instead of offering sympathy. Months ago, she would have found it offensive. Now, she found it oddly refreshing. Over the next week in London, Angela did something she hadn't allowed herself before. She met with Dominic's team, architects, engineers, community planners, and asked basic questions she would have been embarrassed to ask earlier. She admitted what she didn't know. She took notes like a student, not an expert. She spent evenings in her hotel room creating spreadsheets comparing different development models, teaching herself how to read construction timelines and budget allocations. One evening, Dominic found her in the office conference room at 8 p.m., surrounded by architectural drawings and zoning code documents. You're still here. I'm trying to understand why your affordable units are clustered in the north section versus distributed throughout. There's an economic reason, isn't there? Construction phasing. We can break ground on the north section while still securing final approvals for the south. It accelerates the timeline by 8 months. He sat across from her. But you're right to question it. Clustering creates exactly the segregation we're trying to avoid. So we distribute them and accept the longer timeline? Or we find a creative phasing solution that gives us both speed and integration. That's what good development does, solves problems instead of accepting compromises. Angela made a note. I have a lot to learn. You're learning faster than most. You know what impresses me most? You're not pretending to know more than you do. That's rare at your wealth level. The money doesn't change what I don't know. It just means I can afford the best teachers. Angela closed her laptop. I need to think about the project, about what I'm ready for, about whether I can be the kind of partner you need. Fair enough. Dominic straightened. I'm here all week. Take the time you need. That night, alone in her hotel room, Angela did something she'd been avoiding since Christmas. She sat down with a notebook and wrote out the timeline of her marriage's collapse. Not the dramatic ending, the slow erosion that had made the ending possible. Month 1 in London. Called Jake every day. He sounded stressed. She worked longer hours to finish faster. Month 2. Calls became every other day. Jake stopped asking when she was coming home. She told herself he was being supportive. Month 3. Weekly calls, mostly logistics. She discovered a major breakthrough in the case and stayed up 2 nights straight documenting it. Forgot to call on their anniversary. Jake didn't mention it. Month 4. Tessa moved in. Angela only knew because Jake mentioned it casually. Tessa's staying in the guest room while she figures out her divorce. Angela said that was nice of them. Month 5. Jake stopped answering half her calls. Angela told herself he was busy with the business. Month 6. The case consumed everything. She barely noticed when days passed without talking to Jake. Angela stared at the timeline, at the evidence of her own withdrawal presented in stark, undeniable facts. She picked up her phone and called Dominic. I wasn't present, she said when he answered, in my marriage. I was there in body when I was home, but I was never fully there in attention or priority. I told myself work was temporary, that Jake understood, that our marriage could survive anything because we loved each other. But love without presence is just a story you tell yourself. Angela, I'm not saying Jake's betrayal was my fault. It wasn't. He made a choice, but I made choices too. I chose the case over our connection. I chose achievement over intimacy. I chose to believe distance didn't matter because I didn't want to deal with how much it cost. What made you realize this? You, asking me questions I've been afraid to answer. Angela laughed shakily. I think I'm ready now, to build something new, to be a real partner instead of a ghost. Tomorrow morning, Dominic said, meet me at the property. I want to show you what we could create. Dominic, thank you for not letting me stay comfortable. Partners push each other. That's the deal. After they hung up, Angela opened her laptop and composed an email to her therapist. A woman she'd seen twice and then abandoned because it was easier to stay busy than deal with feelings. I'm ready to do the work now, she wrote. I'm ready to face what I need to face. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Some truths couldn't be run from forever. Chapter 7. The Divorce That Changed Everything. Jake Cooper walked into divorce court believing he'd lost everything. He walked out understanding he'd never had it to begin with. The Cook County courthouse smelled like floor polish and broken promises. Jake sat on a bench outside courtroom 4, his attorney shuffling papers beside him with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Across the hall, Angela sat with her attorney Gloria Martinez, looking composed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Jake's car payment. She didn't look at him, not once. They'd been in the same building for 30 minutes, and she hadn't acknowledged his existence. Mr. Cooper, Gloria approached with documents. Ms. Cheadle is willing to waive the waiting period if you sign today. Everything is as outlined in the settlement we sent you. Jake scanned the papers he'd already read a dozen times. Angela kept everything she'd brought into the marriage. He kept his business debts. He paid her $340,000 for the fraudulent mortgage. The house went to a women's shelter. She's giving away the house? Gloria's expression was carefully neutral. Ms. Cheadle believes something good should come from that property. Hope Rising provides transitional housing for women escaping domestic violence. They'll either use it for that purpose or sell it to fund their programs. Jake thought about Angela discovering the fraud, about her finding out he'd forged her signature to gamble with her security. He wanted to explain that he'd been desperate, that the business was dying, that he'd planned to tell her once things stabilized. But those were excuses, not reasons. I'll sign, he said quietly. They entered the courtroom. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and zero patience, reviewed the settlement with clinical efficiency. Mr. Cooper, do you understand you're waiving any claim to Ms. Cheadle's inheritance? Yes, Your Honor. And you acknowledge the debt you owe for fraudulent use of her property? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cheadle, you're certain you want to proceed without seeking criminal charges for the fraud? Angela spoke for the first time, her voice steady. I'm certain, Your Honor. I want closure, not revenge. The word hit Jake like a physical blow. Closure, as if their 5 years of marriage could be wrapped up and filed away like a completed case. The judge signed the papers. Divorce granted. You're both free to go. That was it. 5 years of marriage dissolved in 15 minutes. Jake stood, his attorney gathering papers, but found himself frozen as Angela turned to leave. She moved past him like he was furniture, her perfume, something new, not the scent he remembered, trailing behind her. Angela. She stopped. Didn't turn around, but stopped. Can we talk? Just for a minute, please. Gloria started to object, but Angela raised a hand. It's fine. To Jake. Outside. They found a quiet corner in the courthouse lobby, near windows overlooking the city. Angela stood with her arms crossed, her posture defensive, and Jake realized this might be the last time they ever spoke. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he started. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know I did love you. Everything that happened, every stupid choice I made, it wasn't because I didn't love you. Then why? Angela's voice was quiet, but something sharp lurked underneath. If you loved me, why did you destroy us? I got lonely. You were gone so long and I felt abandoned, even though I knew you were working. Every call got shorter. Every conversation felt like you were distracted. And Tessa was there, and she listened, and she made me feel seen when I felt invisible to you. So you replaced me. I tried to fill a hole that I should have talked to you about instead. I was weak and selfish, and I convinced myself you didn't care anymore because it was easier than admitting I was failing at handling your absence like an adult. Jake's throat tightened. But Angela, you weren't there. Not really. Even when we talked, you were somewhere else. In legal documents, in strategy, in London. You were fighting for our future, but you stopped fighting for our present. Angela's jaw tightened. So this is my fault? No. God, no. My betrayal is entirely my responsibility. I'm just saying, our marriage was dying before I killed it. We both stopped trying. I stopped communicating my loneliness. You stopped being present. We both chose other priorities over each other and then acted surprised when the marriage collapsed under the weight of neglect. I was working to save you. I didn't need saving, Angela. I needed my wife. I needed you to ask if I was okay. To make time for me that wasn't about logistics or business. To fight for our connection instead of assuming it would wait forever. Jake's voice cracked. I'm not saying what I did was justified. It wasn't. But we both failed this marriage. The difference is I failed it in a way that was unforgivable. Angela was quiet for so long, Jake thought she wouldn't respond. Then, you're right. What? You're right. I wasn't present. I told myself the case was temporary, that you understood, that our love was strong enough to survive anything. But I didn't put in the work to keep it strong. I let calls get shorter. I let distance become normal. I chose achievement over intimacy because it was easier and more rewarding. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were dry but devastated. I loved you, Jake, but I also forgot to show it. And by the time I remembered, it was too late. They stood in silence, two people who'd promised forever and delivered destruction instead. I see you're working with Dominic Ashford, Jake said finally. The news coverage. You look happy. Or at least less broken than I feel. I'm not happy. I'm just moving forward. Building something new because I can't stay frozen in the moment you hurt me. Is it serious? Between you two? Angela's smile was sad. It's honest. It's honest. We're building a partnership on respect and challenge instead of comfort and assumption. I don't know where it goes, but I know it's different than what we had. Different how? He doesn't let me hide, doesn't let me stay comfortable in victimhood or blame, forces me to look at my failures instead of just yours. She paused. You and I, we were good at comfort, at assuming we'd always be okay. We were terrible at the hard conversations. I miss you, Jake whispered. I know. I miss who we were before we broke each other. Angela adjusted her bag. But we can't go back. We can only learn from what we destroyed and try not to repeat it with other people. Will you be okay? Really? Eventually, will you? Jake thought about his one-bedroom apartment, his restructured business that he now ran as an employee instead of an owner, the therapy sessions his mother had insisted on. I'm learning. It's humbling and painful and nothing like I thought my life would be. But I'm learning. Then maybe some good came from this. Angela. Yeah? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the affair, for the fraud, for every way I failed you, you deserved better. We both did. Angela turned to leave, then paused. Jake, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to anger is exhausting and I'd rather use that energy to build something new. She walked away, her heels clicking against marble, and Jake watched until she disappeared through the courthouse doors. His attorney approached. You okay? No, but I will be. Jake signed the final papers with steady hands. I have to be. Outside, the late spring sun was warm. Chicago waking from winter, the city renewing itself. Jake walked to the L, joined the stream of people living ordinary lives, and tried to imagine a future where he was someone worth knowing again. Behind him, Angela slid into a car where Dominic waited. He didn't ask how it went, just handed her a bottle of water and let her breathe. "Thank you," she said after a moment, "for being here." Partners show up, that's the deal. Angela leaned back against the seat, watching the city pass, and felt something release in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not closure, just acceptance that some things ended, and that was okay. Some things ended, so better things could begin. Chapter 8. The Empire. They built together. Somewhere between London boardrooms and Chicago construction sites, Angela stopped building an empire for revenge and started building one for legacy. Time had passed since the divorce. Enough time for wounds to scar over, for patterns to shift, for Angela to stop counting days since the betrayal and start counting milestones towards something new. Phoenix Commons had grown from blueprints and financial models into steel and concrete rising from the London earth, a testament to what happened when vision met execution. Angela stood in the middle of what would become the development's central plaza, watching crews transform vacant land into something that would change thousands of lives. The development sprawled across both her property and Dominic's, 20 acres of carefully planned integration between luxury and affordable housing, green spaces and community centres, commercial zones and public art. Construction moved in orchestrated phases, each section building on the last, the timeline extended deliberately to ensure quality over speed. "You're smiling." Dominic appeared at her elbow, hard hat slightly askew, blueprints tucked under one arm. "That's either very good, or you've finally lost your mind from dealing with contractors. I'm just thinking about how different this is from what I imagined when I won the case. You imagined selling the land and living on a beach somewhere. I imagined using the money to hurt Jake, to make him understand what he'd lost." Angela gestured at the construction around them. "Instead, I'm building housing for people who need it, funding a women's foundation, creating jobs. Somehow revenge became purpose." Funny how that works. Dominic unfurled the blueprints on a makeshift table. "Though I'd argue this is still revenge, just a better kind." "How so?" "The best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant to your story. Jake's somewhere in Chicago, living his small life. You're here, building something that will outlast both of you. That's power he can never touch." Angela studied the blueprints. The next phase of the development, affordable family units with integrated childcare and community gardens. She'd fought for the childcare component over Dominic's initial objections that it would complicate the budget. She'd won by presenting data on how affordable childcare increased resident retention and community stability. More importantly, she'd understood the data because she'd spent months learning how to read economic impact studies, how to model long-term community outcomes, how to think like a developer instead of just someone with money. The education hadn't been quick or easy. She'd made mistakes, costly ones. There was the week she'd approved a material substitution that looked identical on paper, but would have resulted in building code violations. Dominic's chief engineer had caught it, and Angela had been mortified. Instead of hiding the error, she'd called a team meeting, admitted her mistake, and asked for a tutorial on material specifications. The team had respected her for it. "When we started this, I thought it was just business," Angela said. "Now it feels like it matters, like it's the thing I'm meant to be doing. Not just because it's profitable, though God knows the returns are exceeding projections, but because it's changing people's lives in tangible ways." That's the difference between building for ego and building for impact. Dominic pointed to the southern section. "Speaking of impact, the Women's Foundation is requesting a meeting about expanding the transitional housing program. They want to name the facility after you." "Absolutely not. I funded it. But it's not about me. They're going to insist you donated your house, plus matched their annual budget for the foreseeable future. That's transformational support. I don't want recognition, I want results. Dominic smiled. Which is why they want to honor you. Angela, you realize you've become something rare, right? A billionaire who actually uses their wealth to create meaningful change instead of just accumulating more wealth. I learned from the best. She nudged his shoulder. You could have built traditional luxury condos and made double the profit. Instead, you're mixing affordable units into prime real estate and creating inclusive communities. My mother lived in social housing when I was young. Terrible conditions, no green space, no community resources, just warehousing poor people out of sight. Dominic's expression hardened. I swore if I ever had the power to build differently, I would. This project is personal for me, too. They'd been working together for over a year now, and Angela had learned the stories Dominic didn't share with journalists. 2 failed marriages because he couldn't stop working. A childhood marked by his mother's struggles as a Ghanaian immigrant in London. Building his first fortune by age 30, losing it to a bad partnership by 32, rebuilding it by 35. Every success earned through brutal work and hard lessons. The relationship between them had evolved slowly, carefully, without the rush that had characterized Angela's marriage to Jake. They'd established ground rules early: honesty over comfort, challenge over accommodation, individual therapy to handle their respective baggage instead of expecting the relationship to heal old wounds. They fought, often intensely, about design decisions, budget allocations, community priorities. But they fought fair, with data and respect, and they always emerged with better solutions than either had started with. We're quite a pair, Angela mused. 2 people who destroyed their marriages, building buildings, now building an actual life together. Is that what we're doing? Dominic's tone was light, but something serious lurked underneath. Building a life? Angela felt her pulse quicken. They'd been dancing around this conversation for months. The late-night calls that had nothing to do with business. The way their hands would brush reviewing documents and neither would pull away. The hotel room in Barcelona during a development conference where they'd kissed for the first time and then spent 3 hours talking about whether they were ready for this. I think we might be, Angela said carefully, though I'm terrified of repeating old mistakes. Me too. Which is why we do this differently than we did before. How? Honestly. If work is consuming me, you call me on it. If you're withdrawing, I push you to talk. We build this relationship with the same attention we're building Phoenix Commons, carefully, intentionally, with solid foundations before adding complexity. That's remarkably unromantic. Romance failed me twice. I'm trying practicality. Dominic turned to face her fully. I'm not good at grand gestures, Angela. I'm good at showing up, at doing the work, at being present even when it's difficult. If that's enough for you, then I want to try this. If you need poetry and passion and someone who'll prioritize you over business, I'm not your man. What if I need someone who respects my ambition instead of resenting it? Someone who challenges me to be better instead of asking me to be smaller? Someone who understands that work isn't the enemy of intimacy if you're building something together? Then I'm definitely your man. Angela kissed him there in the middle of the construction site. Hard hats slightly in the way, dust from excavation coating everything, the sound of heavy machinery providing the least romantic soundtrack imaginable. It was perfect. Ms. Cheadle, a site manager, approached with a tablet. We've got an issue with the foundation pour in section C. Concrete isn't setting right. Angela pulled back with a laugh. And we're back. This is what I mean about showing up. Dominic took the tablet, reviewing data. The dramatic moments are easy. It's the concrete problems that test relationships. They spent the next 4 hours solving the foundation issue, arguing about solutions with the intensity that had defined their partnership from the start. Angela held her own now in these technical discussions, not because she'd magically become an engineer, but because she'd learned enough to ask the right questions and understand the implications of different answers. By the time they reached resolution, Angela was exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. This was what partnership looked like when you built it right, not effortless. Nothing worth having was effortless, but collaborative, respectful, real. Over the following months, they refined their rhythm. Time split between London and Chicago, depending on which project needed attention. Weekends reserved for actual rest, a revolutionary concept for both of them. Therapy sessions they attended individually to deal with their respective baggage instead of expecting the relationship to heal old wounds. They were learning to be people who existed outside of work, who could sit quietly together without needing to fill the silence with productivity. It wasn't always smooth. There were arguments that left them both frustrated. Angela's tendency to withdraw when overwhelmed clashed with Dominic's need to process everything verbally. His workaholic patterns would resurface during high-stress periods, triggering Angela's fears of abandonment. But they'd committed to working through the friction instead of running from it. "My therapist asked me something interesting," Angela said one evening in Dominic's London flat, wine glasses in hand, city lights sprawling below. "She asked if I was with you because I love you or because you're safe. And both, I think. You're the safest risk I've ever taken. You're someone I trust not to betray me, but also someone who won't let me hide from hard truths. You're comfortable in the best ways and challenging in the necessary ones. My therapist asked if I was capable of prioritizing you over work when it matters. Are you? I'm learning to be. Yesterday, when you called during that council meeting about zoning variances, I stepped out. My old self would have sent you to voicemail and called back later. My new self realized that you wouldn't call during a meeting unless it was important." "It wasn't important. I just missed your voice." Dominic smiled. "Then I made the right choice." By the time Phoenix Commons approached completion, Angela and Dominic had been together for over a year. Not married, neither was rushing into that particular institution again, but committed in ways that mattered more than legal documents. They'd weathered construction delays, budget overruns, regulatory challenges, and personal conflicts. They'd built something real, both in concrete and in connection. Angela walked through the completed sections of the development one evening, Dominic beside her, both of them taking in what they'd created. Families moved into finished units, children played in completed parks, community spaces buzzed with activity. The vision had become reality, imperfect but functional, ambitious but achievable. "You know what's wild?" Angela said. "If Jake hadn't cheated, none of this exists. I'd still be in Chicago, probably supporting his business, never fighting for that land case, never building anything of my own. Butterfly effect. One betrayal, thousands of lives changed. I'm not saying I'm grateful he cheated, but I'm grateful for who I became after, for the strength I didn't know I had, for the vision I never would have pursued if I'd stayed comfortable. Think you'll ever talk to him again?" "Probably not. We said what needed saying in the courthouse. Anything after that is just revisiting pain." Angela leaned into Dominic's shoulder. "I hope he's okay, though. I hope he learned something. I hope he's building a better version of himself, too." "That's generous." "It's honest. Hating him takes energy I'd rather use building things that matter." They stood in comfortable silence as the sun set over Phoenix Commons, painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. "I have something to ask you," Dominic said quietly. Angela's heart jumped. "If this is a proposal, we should discuss—" "It's not. Well, it is. Just not that kind." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I want you to be my full business partner, not just Phoenix Commons, everything. Ashford Development Group becomes Ashford Cheadle Development. Equal partnership, equal say, equal profits, equal headaches." Angela stared at the envelope. "Dominic, your company is worth billions. You built that over 30 years. I've been doing this for barely 2 years. And you've proven yourself a brilliant developer with vision that matches mine and work ethic that exceeds it. I don't want to work alone anymore, Angela. I want to build with you. Not just one project, everything. This is insane. It's logical. We work well together. We challenge each other. We share values. We're building a life together. Why not formalize the business too? Angela opened the envelope. Partnership papers, Ashford Cheadle Development Group, terms that were genuinely equal, not some patronizing gesture. What about when we fight? She asked. Because we will fight. We've already fought about community space allocation and affordable unit ratios and whether the common areas needed that much green space. And we resolved every fight by presenting data and compromising where logic demanded it. Angela, I'm not asking you to be my employee or my yes woman. I'm asking you to be my equal, to build an empire with me instead of just your own empire alone. Angela read through the papers, thought about the past years, thought about who she'd been when she walked out of her house on Christmas Eve and who she'd become since. Yes, she said, let's build an empire. They signed the papers right there, using the hood of a construction vehicle as a desk, the completed Phoenix Commons bearing witness to what two broken people could create when they chose to build instead of hide. Chapter 9. The closure she didn't know. She needed some apologies don't come from the people who hurt you, they come from the people who watched and said nothing. Angela was in her Chicago office reviewing contracts when her assistant buzzed. Miss Cheadle, there's a Mrs. Cooper here to see you. She says it's important. Angela's stomach dropped. Which Mrs. Cooper? She says she's Jake's mother, Evelyn Cooper. Angela hadn't seen Evelyn since before the divorce. They'd been close once. Sunday dinners, birthday celebrations, the kind of relationship that had made Angela believe she'd found family in marriage. Then the betrayal, and Evelyn had sent one text. I'm so sorry for what my son did. I understand if you never want to see me again. Angela had never responded. Send her in. Evelyn Cooper looked older than Angela remembered. The woman who'd always seemed unshakable now seemed fragile, her hands twisting her purse strap nervously. Angela, thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure you would. Please, sit. Angela gestured to the chair across her desk, her professional mask firmly in place. What can I do for you? I came to apologize. I should have done this 2 years ago, but I was a coward. Evelyn's eyes were damp. I knew Jake was struggling. I knew you were gone a long time. I should have called you. Should have told you he needed support. Should have stepped in before everything fell apart. Instead, I stayed quiet and told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Evelyn, you're not responsible for Jake's choices. No, but I'm responsible for mine. I raised him to be entitled, to believe things would work out because they always had. I never taught him to communicate when he was struggling or to fight for what mattered. I made excuses for him his whole life, and when he destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him, I stayed silent, because I didn't know how to admit I'd failed him as a mother. Angela sat back, surprised by the raw honesty. You didn't fail him. Adults make their own choices. But children become those adults, based on what we teach them. I taught Jake that his feelings were always valid, that his needs should be prioritized, that the women in his life should accommodate him. I never taught him that marriage was work, that partnership required sacrifice, that love was a verb, not a feeling. Evelyn's voice cracked. I made him into someone who could betray you and then blame you for being gone too long. That's my failure. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it. Because I've watched you build an incredible life these past years. The foundation, Phoenix Commons, your partnership with Dominic. I've seen you transform pain into purpose while my son is still struggling to become someone worth knowing. And I realized I never told you I was proud of you, that you were the daughter I never had, that losing you was the worst consequence of Jake's betrayal, even worse than losing the money. Angela felt her throat tighten. Evelyn, I'm not asking for your forgiveness or your friendship. I just needed you to know that I failed you too, and I'm sorry. You were family to me, and I threw that away by staying silent when I should have fought for you both. They sat in silence for a moment, two women connected by love for a man who'd hurt them both in different ways. "How is Jake?" Angela asked quietly. "Rebuilding, slowly. He's in therapy, sold the construction company and now works for someone else. Says he needed to learn to be an employee before he could be trusted as a leader again." Evelyn managed a small smile. "He's dating someone. Nice woman, very patient. He's taking it slow, learning to communicate instead of assuming. It's humbling for him. I'm glad he's working on himself." "Are you happy?" Evelyn asked. "Really?" Angela thought about Dominic, about Phoenix Commons, about the foundation supporting hundreds of women, about the life she'd built from wreckage. "I'm building something real, something mine, something that matters. So yes, I think I am." "Then maybe some good came from the pain." "Maybe." Angela stood, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming, for saying what you needed to say." Evelyn stood, but didn't take Angela's hand. Instead, she pulled her into a hug. "I'm proud of you. You should know that. Somewhere in this city is a young woman who lost everything, and you're showing her that she can build it all back better. That matters more than you know." After Evelyn left, Angela stood at her office window, watching the city move below. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dominic. "Dinner tonight? Need to discuss something important." Angela smiled. With Dominic, important could mean anything from a business crisis to what color napkins for the Phoenix Commons opening. That evening over Thai food in Dominic's apartment, he pushed a small box across the table. "Before you panic, it's not a ring." Angela laughed and opened it. Inside, a key. "It's to my place here and in London. I'm not asking you to move in. We both need our space and we've agreed on that. But I want you to have access, to feel like both places are yours too, even when I'm not there." "This feels significant." "It is. I'm learning to share my space, which my therapist assures me is growth." Dominic's smile was wry. "I'm also terrified I'll revert to workaholic hermit tendencies, and you'll realize you've committed to someone fundamentally broken. You're not broken, you're just built differently, and so am I." Angela pocketed the key. "We're two people who destroyed marriages by choosing work over presence. Now we're choosing to do both. That's not broken, that's evolved." Tomorrow's the Phoenix Commons opening. International press. Thousands of people. Our biggest project debut. Nervous? Excited? Terrified? Proud? Dominic reached across the table, taking her hand. "Grateful I'm doing this with you instead of alone." "Me too." They spent the evening reviewing final details for the opening, arguing about speech length and photo opportunities, with the comfortable rhythm of partners who'd learned to work in tandem. Later, as Angela was leaving, Dominic caught her hand. "One more thing. After tomorrow, after all the press and celebration, I think we should take a real vacation. No laptops, no projects, just us. Somewhere quiet, learning to be people who don't only exist through work." That sounds terrifying and necessary. Most good things are. Angela drove home through Chicago streets, past the house she'd once owned that now served as transitional housing for women rebuilding their lives. She didn't stop, didn't feel the need to revisit what had been. Her phone pinged with an email notification. Subject line, "Phoenix Commons Impact Report. Preview." She opened it at a stoplight, early data showing resident satisfaction rates, community engagement metrics, economic impact on surrounding neighborhoods. Every number exceeded projections, but buried in the statistics was a testimonial from a single mother who'd moved into the affordable housing section. "For the first time in my life, I'm living somewhere that wasn't designed to warehouse poor people out of sight. My kids have green space to play. I have childcare I can afford. My neighbors are doctors and teachers and artists and other single mums. We're not separated by income, we're mixed together like actual community. Phoenix Commons gave me more than housing. It gave me hope." Angela read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Dominic with one word. "This." His response came immediately. This is why we do it. Tomorrow, they'd cut ribbons and give speeches and smile for cameras. But tonight, Angela sat in her car and let herself feel the weight of what they'd created. Not just buildings, but possibility. Not just profit, but purpose. She'd walked out of a burning marriage years ago with nothing but $1 billion settlement and a shattered heart. She was walking into tomorrow with an empire, a partner, and the knowledge that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming someone even you didn't know you could be. Chapter 10. The Empire of Love. Angela Cheadle stood on the rooftop terrace of her London penthouse on the eve of her greatest triumph, wearing her power like armor and her peace like a crown, proof that the best revenge is becoming someone you're proud of. Below, Phoenix Commons glowed in the twilight, every window lit, every public space alive with movement. Tomorrow's grand opening would bring dignitaries, press, and thousands of residents celebrating not just a building, but a revolution in how communities could be built. Tonight belonged to quiet reflection. Dominic joined her with 2 glasses of wine. They didn't speak immediately, just stood together watching their creation breathe with life. "Your mother called," Angela said eventually. "She's bringing 12 family members to the opening. My mother thinks every event I'm involved in is a personal audience with the Queen. Fair warning, she'll try to feed you. Repeatedly. Resistance is futile." Angela laughed. "Your family is wonderful, loud, but wonderful. They like you. My mother told me if I mess this up, she's keeping you and disowning me." "Smart woman." Dominic turned to face her fully. "Speaking of messing things up, we should talk about last week." Angela's stomach tightened. Last week they'd had their worst fight yet, about whether to expand into Asian markets, about workload distribution, about Dominic agreeing to a project without consulting her first. They'd both said things sharper than intended. Angela had left and hadn't called for 2 days. "I'm sorry I shut down," Angela said. "Old pattern. When conflict gets intense, I disappear instead of dealing with it. And I'm sorry I made a unilateral decision. I keep forgetting I have a partner now who deserves equal say." Dominic set down his wine glass. "But here's what's different. We're talking about it. We're not letting it fester. We're not pretending it didn't happen, or that we're fine when we're not. Growth is uncomfortable, but necessary. My therapist pointed out that I keep treating our partnership like my previous solo ventures. I need to actually share power, not just say I'm sharing it. And mine pointed out I run when things get hard instead of staying and fighting through it. Different pattern, same avoidance." Angela moved closer. "But we're trying. That's what matters." "Tomorrow night," Dominic said. "After all the chaos, I want to ask you something, but I need you to know it's not what you think. Cryptic, I hate cryptic. You'll survive the suspense." The next day arrived in a blur of activity. Angela wore an emerald suit that commanded attention, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, every inch the billionaire developer she'd become. Dominic matched her in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and together they greeted dignitaries, gave interviews, and watched as Phoenix Commons officially opened to the world. The speeches were the easy part. Angela spoke about second chances, about building from rubble, about choosing creation over destruction. The crowd, over 2,000 people, erupted in applause. But the moment that broke her composure came during the community residence panel, when a woman Angela recognized from the impact report stood up. "My name is Jennifer. I'm a single mother living in the affordable housing section with my 2 kids. Before Phoenix Commons, we lived in a place that had rats and broken heat and neighbors who scared me. I worked 3 jobs and could barely afford rent." Her voice shook with emotion. "Now my kids play in safe parks. I can afford childcare and cut down to 1 good job. My daughter's teacher lives 2 floors up. My neighbor who's a doctor helped when my son got sick. We're not separated by money here, we're just neighbors. Phoenix Commons didn't just give me housing, it gave me hope that the world could actually work differently." The applause was thunderous, but Angela's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall in public. After the formal events ended, Dominic pulled Angela away from the crowds to a quiet corner of the development's Central Park. Lights twinkled in trees, families strolled past, the sound of children's laughter floating through the air. "This is what we built," Dominic said quietly. "Not just buildings, not just profit. This, I know. Years ago you were sitting in a hotel room trying to remember how to breathe. Look at you now." Angela looked around at the community they'd created, the green spaces, the mixed-income housing, the childcare center, the community arts building, all of it functioning as designed. More importantly, all of it filled with people actually living better lives. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You absolutely could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to." Dominic reached into his jacket pocket. "Which brings me to what I wanted to ask you." Angela's heart jumped. "Dominic, relax. It's still not a ring." He pulled out an envelope. "It's bigger than that. Inside, architectural plans, a development proposal, multiple sites across 3 continents. What is this?" "The next 10 years. Projects we could build together, communities we could create, lives we could change. I'm asking if you want to keep building with me. Not just Phoenix Commons, not just Ashford Cheadle development, but a legacy, something that outlasts us both." Angela studied the plans: sustainable communities in Mumbai, affordable housing initiatives in Johannesburg, mixed-use developments in São Paulo, projects that would require years of work, massive capital investment, and complete commitment. "This is insane. It's ambitious. There's a difference. This is a decade of our lives. At least. Probably longer." Dominic met her eyes. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Angela. We've both done marriage badly enough to be cautious. But I am asking you to build a life with me, to commit to this partnership, business and personal, with the same energy we've given everything else, to trust that what we're creating together is worth the risk of trying again." Angela's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the plans. Each project was carefully designed for maximum community impact. Each budget included affordable components. Each design integrated sustainability and accessibility. This wasn't just business. This was a mission statement for how to use wealth and power to actually change the world. "What if we fail?" she whispered. "Then we fail together. Learn from it. Build something better next time. Angela, I've failed at a lot of things, but I've never failed at showing up and doing the work. If you're with me, we'll work through whatever comes." Angela looked up at this man who'd challenged her from the first moment they met, who'd refused to let her stay comfortable in victimhood, who'd pushed her to examine her own failures instead of just blaming others, who'd taught her that partnership meant growth, not just companionship. "Yes," she said, "let's build a legacy." Dominic smiled, genuinely smiled, which he didn't do often. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified, but I'm sure." Angela gestured at Phoenix Commons around them. "Years ago I thought my life was over. Now I'm standing in the middle of something I created from pain. If I can do this, I can do anything. Not alone, though, not anymore. No, not alone." They kissed there in the park they'd built, surrounded by families enjoying space designed with actual care, and Angela felt something settle in her chest. Not closure exactly, but completion. The final piece of healing she hadn't known she needed. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about Phoenix Commons opening. You built something incredible. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. Jake." Angela showed it to Dominic. He raised an eyebrow. "You going to respond?" Angela looked at the message, at the ghost of a life she'd left behind. She thought about the woman who'd walked out of that house on Christmas Eve, broken and furious and lost, about the journey from that moment to this one. She deleted the message without responding. "That chapter's closed," she said simply. "And this one?" Dominic gestured at the plans, at Phoenix Commons, at the life they were building. "This one's just beginning." They spent the evening walking through Phoenix Commons, watching residents settle into their homes, children playing in parks designed for actual play instead of just aesthetics, community spaces filling with people who'd been strangers months ago and were neighbors now. Later, back at the penthouse, Angela stood at the window overlooking the development. Dominic joined her, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I came back to Chicago with a $1 billion gift, planning to save a man who didn't want saving, and instead, I saved myself, and built an empire in the process. We built an empire, together. Best revenge I've ever seen." Angela leaned into him, watching lights flicker across Phoenix Commons like stars fallen to earth. "It's not revenge anymore, it's just life. The one I chose instead of the one that was chosen for me. And the future. The future is 10 years of projects, international travel, arguments about building codes and community impact metrics, learning to share space and power and decision-making, probably more therapy, definitely more growth." She turned to face him. "It's terrifying and exciting and nothing like I planned." "Sounds perfect. Sounds real." They stood together in the penthouse Angela had bought as a refuge and transformed into a home, looking out at the city that had witnessed her destruction and her resurrection. Below, Phoenix Commons glowed, proof that from absolute devastation, something beautiful could rise. The woman who'd been betrayed on Christmas had become the woman who built empires by choice. The woman who'd walked away in silence had become the woman who spoke with authority. The woman who'd lost everything had become the woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. And she'd found someone who saw that worth and matched it with his own, not a fairy tale ending. Just two complicated people building something real together, one community at a time, one hard conversation at a time, one day at a time. The $1 billion inheritance had bought her freedom, but the work she'd done with that freedom had bought her something more valuable. The knowledge that she could survive anything, and the certainty that she'd never again settle for being anything less than exactly who she chose to be. Angela Cheadle stood in her empire of her own making, wearing her power like second skin and her peace like armor, and knew with absolute certainty the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was transformation, and the best love wasn't rescue, it was partnership between equals who'd both been broken and both chose to build anyway. She'd come home to save her husband and found him destroying her. She'd left with nothing but money and walked into a future she'd created with her own vision, her own strength, and her own unbreakable will. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with revolution. And Angela had revolutionized not just her life but thousands of others. That was power no betrayal could ever touch.